without context.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a unique episode of the Without Context podcast. Just being Haley today.
Hi,
Um,
hi.
Hi. When you are listening to this, you may recall in the past that we had been uploading videos of our actual play from Call of the Netherdeep onto YouTube. We stopped doing that kind of in protest of WotC being shitty. But I still want to talk about more than talking about the character or the story or any of that stuff. Today, I want to talk about the characters and the player characters that we had, because we'll get into it in a bit. But like to surmise it very briefly here, for as random as everyone rolled for everything, we kind of made it all work. And I think I want to start there kind of for character creation, because I have with me my little warlock turned paladin turned Healy boy. Haley played Sorn, and that was an experience. So go
Oh
ahead,
my
talk
god.
about let's talk about some of the character creation elements when we first started, and kind of see how we're going from there.
Yeah, sure. So Sorn of Dende Viana, what we rolled all of our characters using the like random rolly thing that came
Heroic
with
Chronicle.
the Heroic Chronicle. And I think, which I don't know if I've ever told you this before, Deca, but I hated the fact that I had to play a dwarf. I have only ever played like half elf, elf. I was a halfling barbarian in a campaign, human. Ophelia was like this wicked hot ASMR, and now I'm stuck with this like dwarf guy, and I was super not happy with it. So when we rolled all of Soren's stuff, well, when I rolled it, he was a dwarf from Grimgalier, which is in the Empire, but had all of like was consecuted or had like he had, how did we figure that out again, like that he was consecuted? But he had a bunch of like dynasty connections in the things that I rolled, and like none of it made any sense. And I was sitting with Charlie, and I believe Echo was on that call too, and I was just trying to hash it out. I was like, what if Soren's consecuted and this is one of his like future lives? Like he used to be like a member of the dynasty and now is stuck being just some, in my opinion, like stupid dwarf out in the Empire.
Damn.
So
Anti-dwarf sentiment here.
well, now that you know that like Haley did not want to play a dwarf,
That does lend itself into a lot of the like
you see
inner
where
turmoil.
yes, so you see that was why I had Sorn hate the body that he was in and try like in the beginning of the campaign hiding, doing everything he can do to like not look as much like a dwarf, like shaving his face like 6 times a day, not eating to the point of being like emaciated, so he didn't have like the stocky sort of body type. Because Sorn was the last thing Sorn remembers being was a drow, and then wakes up in this dwarf body like what the fuck. So that's sort of where that root came from, was just I didn't want to play a dwarf. So his goals were I don't want to look like a dwarf, and I eventually want to not be a dwarf anymore.
So that conversation that you had with what was it, Duck and Echo, was before you even came to me about what you were playing?
Yep.
Yeah.
We were all I think Charlie or Duck was rolling Kai and Echo was rolling Soleil, like who would become Kai and who would become Soleil. We were just all in a Discord call doing this together. Well, Charlie was walking me through the Heroic Chronicle because I've been playing D&D since 2018, but I still feel very much like a beginner. So I needed help from someone with a lot more expertise to roll a character, because I've always just like made one up. Like Ophelia was literally like the healiest healer who ever healed. I don't know if it came out in any of the times we were playing in Sharky's game, but like Ophelia literally means helper in like Greek. So it's like, you need a cleric, I'm gonna be the cleric-iest cleric. And that's how Soren became the warlock that he was, because you can't make me not build a healer.
You can take the girly out the healer.
You can take me out of the cleric, but you can't take the cleric out of me.
Uh, cool. So you started there. And I remember when you gave me the stuff that would eventually become Sorn. You're like, hey, took my notes. Do they look good? Everything looked great. Personally, as a DM, I have a saying that's like, more is more. The more you give me, the more I can, for lack of a better term, spit back out at you. So when we have, and truly, some of these things were accidental, like the little cavern when you guys were at the Emerald Loop caravan stop that happened to be Spider Queen affiliated. That was completely accidental.
Yeah, so one thing that was part of Soren's background, for those who don't know me, I am a like enormous Essek Thalis girly. So I know a bit too much about the Kryn dynasty, and when I thought up Soren, I was like, what would be the most interesting den to have him from? And the only thing we know about Den Devyana in the Wild Mount book is that there's someone amongst them who is secretly working for the Cult of Spiders, Lolth. And I was like, what if this guy is in that den, but is like a devout follower of the Luxon enough to have been consecuted? Like, what a weird dynamic that would be. Like, how much does he know? How much doesn't he know? How does that impact him? So, like, that's why I picked Devyana. Because it would have been too obvious for me to just be like, he's gonna be a Thalis.
So you mentioned that you were going to be a Thalis girly, or you had been considering it.
Yeah, I it felt too obvious to make him a Thalis just as like a fucking Essek Thalis simp. So I thought it would provide more fun opportunities for you if he was in Devyana. Because you could lean into like Cult of Spiders, or it ended up going the way that it went.
Yeah. Some of my, let me cat back to my notes.
I have his character sheet up in case we need it.
The bullet points that you gave me as you were giving me the sheet is like, Soren's part of Dandayavana. They are repugnant traitors. And they kind of, eventually we worked out that Soren was like the golden boy who is consecuted. It's like, look, we can't be bad guys. Look, he's right here.
Yep. The red herring.
Mm-hmm. And then some of the other notes that you gave me were that he was in a skirmish against a Dwendalian empire that eventually cost him his life, at least in that part, and then woke up a dwarf.
Yep, woke up a dwarf.
And then eventually ran away from his dwarven home.
Well, there was a little bit more to him running away from his dwarven home. For the first, I would say 2/3 of the campaign, Soren was under the impression that he had murdered the family of the dwarf whose body, like, of his second life. Like, he especially when you were like, oh yeah, go to Pins and Needles in Ank'Harel. It's run by what's his fuck Keenhammer, and I'm like, how dare you bring up the Keenhammers? So, Sorn, when he was reborn in his new life, was born as Barum Keenhammer, the dwarf guy. Plagued, that kid grew up like plagued with nightmares about being in a war, which like made sense because he would have grown up like during the war of, what was it, like Ash and Light or something?
War of Ash and Light, yeah.
But that was not, we ended up learning that was not the war that Sorn died in, LOL. And
years older than I thought he was.
The only time when Barum didn't have nightmares was when he was like outside of anywhere Sorn had been, which is like the ocean, so he became a sailor. And when Sorn's like remembering his memories started, because that word is just a mouthful of fucking vowels, he freaks out. He just sees that he's surrounded by people he perceives as his enemy from when he was a drow, and knifed his way out and was fully under the impression he had killed the Keenhammers and was carrying that guilt with him the whole time. And then you drop that his fucking cousin runs the clothing store.
You're not allowed to have a body count yet. And so I added my own little twist to some of these things, as well. in that I took a lot of inspiration from like, big families, like, big POC families where, everybody knows everybody, and even your like third cousin down the line, you still maintain some sort of warm friendship with them. And that's kind of how I envisioned the Keenhammers to be. And so I came up with some rules for of my own for whenever Soren is out in the world. So Soren's
Oh
family,
God.
the Keenhammers, love and trust him implicitly.
Oh.
The Keenhammers will always be able to point out Soren, and no amount of non-magical disguises will be able to do that. They always knew.
Well, he was using like disguise self the first time,
and that would work. But
then he dropped it because he got so nervous. But him dyeing his hair and losing weight. Oh my God, you devious little bitch! That's incredible. I didn't know that.
I like to call it kindred true sight.
Oh, that's
every other family not named the Daviana in Soren's presence is going to be nothing but loving, caring, trusting. There was that really beautiful moment we had in the writing role plays where you were helping a lost little girl find her mother.
Mm-hmm.
This big Olympian mother just came by and just squeezed the life out of Soren.
Oh my God. And I loved it was like big muscle mommy and like skinny skinny noodle dad.
Uh-huh.
Just a guy. I loved that moment because it started off like so innocuous for Soren, where it's just like, oh, there's a lost kid. Like I like to think Soren's a good person, and was like,
sure,
I'm lost. Like I'm trying to find my family too. Like I totally get it. Let me help you find yours. And it turns into this moment of just character growth of like, his family was never like that, and he remembers the Keenhammers being like that, and it was just sort of like, maybe I shouldn't be spending all of this energy trying to go back to a family that like does not give a shit about me, because Soren's first goals were to find an artifact or something of value enough to trade with the dynasty to get his drow body back. Mm-hmm. Either through like, this was me like metagaming myself, but like Soren obviously didn't know any of these things, like whether the magic still existed out there for the spell that, spoilers for Critical Role's campaign 2, that puts not the brave back to Veth Bernardo. Mm-hmm. Or some other kind of like true polymorph. I don't know. That was his plan, was like, if I find something good enough, I can become my old self, go back with my family, and like continue my life as it should have been. And I don't think Soren ever saw it. But the magic shop right across from where you guys stayed in Ankara, for the most part, actually did have that the meat man
from no, the other one. The other one that Amada went to a lot. They had a tome from Caleb Widowgast, and inside of that would have been that spell.
Oh, wow. That's so funny.
I just left that there just in case.
Yeah, and that sort of started to go by the wayside, between which I'm sure we'll go into like at length, his relationship with Thermot. And just sort of the relationship with his party has sort of helped him. And just that moment with that family, and then his talk with his cousin sort of solidified, like, perhaps I shouldn't be breaking my back for this family that doesn't care. And then when he remembers the truth about what happened with his family, he definitely wasn't going to try and go back.
Well, it's also even deeper than that. Like, the when you eventually return to Bazzoxan, because that's where Soren kept watch for the most part, like, even meeting the what's his name, Thalos over there, Varen. And seeing, oh yeah, Varen, and even him being like, oh yeah, no, I mean, you're not a soldier anymore, so you're good. You're no longer on duty.
So Soren took that completely differently than the way you just explained it. I remember in that moment, it was just like, my heart shattered when he's like, oh, you're not a soldier anymore. Soren took that as like, we don't want you, you don't belong here. And that like broke something in Soren of just like, because he wanted so badly just to go back to what he knew after being, I think part of it was just wanting to go back to what was familiar in a time that's obviously like very painful and confusing, and he's having to do it by himself, which isn't part of like the culture of the dynasty. You shouldn't be doing that by yourself.
It is, and yeah, that's something we learn in Critical Role itself. Spoilers for campaign, is that when these people go into this anonymous, they have somebody there helping them out. But because we would learn that Soren's family, the surviving family, is in jail, he doesn't really have that, nor would he really have that anyway, because he was the lone consecuted one. And he kind of died and then came back through a freak accident of like a beacon just happened to be running around in the background.
Yeah. And I just, when they were in Bazzoxan, he was just like, I mean, you remember when he was in front of the fucking...
He was so confident.
Nightmare engine. Yeah. Just like, I'm finally back to where I belong. I could sort of pick up exactly where I left off. And like, obviously, he was gone for a while. Life has moved forward. Time has moved forward. And like, there's no place for him there. And that just sort of wrecks him. And part of him stayed wrecked for a while, and the other part was like, well, nothing can hurt me any further than this now, so fuck it, we ball. Yeah. But then just like being around that family, having that conversation with his cousin where he was just like, perhaps I need to reassess my like, is the Davianas, like going back to the Davianas, is that really, he knows he can't go back to the Key Neighbors because he thinks he killed them. But he wouldn't feel comfortable anyway. But yeah, he's my little conflicted boy. Adore that little dumbass.
And I guess we can talk about one of the other elements of Call of the Netherdeep is the rival party. And I think all of them, I think I did a good enough job with all of them to make them like potential romance partners in the
romance
group. Romance partner.
Sorry.
But I think the only one that ever truly really stuck was Dermot, because he was just a little guy hanging out with another little guy, and they were both followers of the Luxon, and it was kind of always going to happen.
So I made Sorn, ironically, because I didn't think he should be romanced because he's got too much going on. And he was originally going to be this sort of like aloof, kind of douchebaggy, like angry, like grumpy, broody, moody dickhead. And hopefully by the end of it, he either like gets his body back and stops being a dickhead, or like through the power of friendship stops being an asshole.
And this gun I found.
And this gun I found. But it was truly, I had to miss the first session, I think, because I had work. Mm-hmm. And so I missed whatever, like, to this day, couldn't tell you what happened in that first session. But you did a text RP where he meets Dermot in the Temple to the Luxon, which is the first time Sorn's been able to like practice his religion since he died. And I had every intention of him like not being interested in anybody, but Dermot was so kind to him and like recognized a boundary that Sorn like very unkindly drew, and it was just like, it was all over from like that second when it was just like, oh, like, you're a normal dwarf, are you like... And Sorn was just like, no, what the fuck are you talking about? And he just continued to be so nice to him that Sorn was just like immediately disarmed and was like, I want to become a drow, but I also want anything that this dude wants. Anything to make this little guy happy.
One of my favorite things about playing Dermot as a character, because he didn't show up super often, but a couple of when he showed up with because he was more, the book tells you to like, you know, only play a couple of characters at a time from the rival party. You have one that's the main one that's talking, and you maybe talk about the other two doing something in the background. But because I told you guys from the top this was going to be more dating sim with the looming end of the world thing in the background. I kind of leaned into that a little more and had them all somewhat available. And I tried to have something that each of them was doing. We had, really cute scenes with Irvin and Soleil. And, things like that.
I love that.
But I think Dermot was the main one who was getting the most attention for the longest time. And I mean, I get it. He's a little guy. He's a little farm boy.
Perfect. I see. It's shocking to me. Like, you're like, yeah, he's just like this farm kid who's like the last of like, what was it, 12 children? And Soren's like, this is a man of the church of power and prestige, and I must like bend the knee and like show such like deference.
He's just like, please don't.
Meanwhile, Soren's like heir apparent to one of the like main families of the dynasty, and is like, no, this guy is the cool one.
It's really interesting to see that dynamic of like, Dermot grew up with pretty much nothing and made something of himself. And your Soren's character, at least when he was a drow, was, the top of prestige and like, etiquette and all of this. And really the roles being reversed in Soren's head of like, I should prostrate to this little guy. But no, that's not at all.
Well, think about,
don't do that.
Think about like Soren growing up. So Soren's family, pretty much everyone in Soren's family except Soren was a follower of Lolth. And in order to sort of throw the scent off themselves, they raised Soren to be devoutly into the Luxon. He kind of went harder than they anticipated, but there we go. So when he started to be and sniff around and kind of get an idea that they might be up to something bad, they're like, oh, what's the most like Luxon patriotic thing you could do? Join the military. So this guy, who's like, his childhood dream was to be like a poet, like write poetries and be known for poetry, joins the military because he's like, it's what I must do for queen and country, and gets like a cushy, like, I wouldn't say Bazzoxan is cushy, but during a war, Bazzoxan was probably a cushy sort of like BS job.
Imagine being on imagine a full-on like conflict is breaking out, and your station is, oh no, you got guard duty. Like,
yeah, he's got guard duty during a war.
Yeah.
But so then he finds out like he's home for like, I imagine it was like Kryn Dynasty Thanksgiving or something stupid.
Sure.
And finds out the truth that like, oh my god, my whole family worships Lolth. I need to report this. And lo and behold, he gets transferred to the front outside of what they assumed would be the range of a beacon for him. Like, they just sent him away to be murdered. Like, they sent him away to die. And then they could be like, oh my god, our son was so devout. Oh my god.
Braver than the rest of you troops.
So I imagine the nicest people to Soren in his childhood were people from the church. So of course he attached really hard to the first person from the church that he finds.
In my head, it's not even that, I wouldn't say Soren's family was like physically abusive, but they were definitely mentally abusive.
Oh my god, yeah, just
like
Soren the Thorn.
You are
Soren
never
the
going
pest.
to be good enough for us.
No, like, even though he was doing everything that his parents told him to do, his sister was somehow still better and more preferred. And I think there was probably an element of a like, hey, I'm your only son, like, shouldn't you be doing stuff for me? But it was always the sister, so he had like an insane inferiority complex because of his twin. And so yeah, it made sense to me for this kid who probably has like a weird meshing of like finds comfort and trauma in religion to like hook his train to the first religious person he finds.
But I thought it was very interesting because a lot of the times, like, in Critical Role, as far as I know, unless someone's going to tell me differently, nobody has ever been consecuted.
Like a player character.
None of the player characters have ever been consecuted. Like, they've talked about it, and I think that comes from most of the the initial bit of the game taking place in the dynasty, and not the dynasty, in the Empire. And I think like there was like three Empire kids, and wherever Mollymock was from. And then I think the only other one was
Coast.
the Menagerie Coast kids. And I think we had Yasha, who was originally from Xhorhas, but one of the nomadic tribes in Xhorhas, but eventually became Orphan Maker and was ousted from her tribe.
Yeah, the closest that we've gotten in campaign to like someone of the dynasty is Essek.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't even like. I know Essek said he was consecuted, but like that bitch is lying. That bitch is lying. Plus, I think because that like probably prior to the War of Ash and Light, that information was kept pretty close to the chest, I would imagine. So not a lot of information would be known in general. So it was interesting, sort of. I don't know if I felt like I was making it up as we go.
A little bit. But there's nothing wrong with that, because that's kind of how this is our version of Exandria, right? So like, you know, maybe something that Matthew Mercer does is and that's something that I wrote into the initial like buy-in for the campaign, is like Bria Iyengar, Brandon Lee Mulligan, you know, Matthew Mercer, they're all great people who write really great versions of Exandria. I am not them. So
you're amazing, Deca.
So my version of Exandria will be a little different. And you know, you'll still see the same power players. Like you guys eventually met Jamansa Ord, and some of the other
Kaisa
people.
Kaisa Ord Truther. I don't care. Kaisa Ord is canon to me.
It's that we actually made it canon.
Truly? I missed that.
Anyway, so as we went on, and some of the familiar places that we see what's it called, the Last Stand or whatever it's called, that bar in Bazzoxan. They go there in Critical Role, so I went and watched that episode where they were there and kind of like tried to get some inspiration about it, and I ended up still making a completely different bar than they did. It was great.
I mean, it was what, like a significant amount of time had passed between campaign 2 and when Call of the Netherdeep takes place, so they could have renovated, they could have remodeled.
Canonically, it takes place in like I forget what year exactly it is, but I timed up I fast forwarded our version of Call of the Netherdeep specifically because there was the weird shit about the war that I didn't want to really click on, and I didn't want to be mid-war, and I was like, nah.
That would have been really interesting for Soren if it was still a war. He probably would have made drastically different choices if it was still a war. That, I think, was sort of like the start of Soren's like individuality awakening, was when Dermot's like, you know, the war is over, right? And he's like, what do you mean the war is over? There's no such thing as the war being over. It's the Empire.
Really funny when we mention that too, is because when Soren says, "Oh, the war's over," and you're like, "No, the War of Ash and Light, it ended like 3 years ago."
So it's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah, and he's like, "Oh, that was a different war."
Oh, I mean, I think for a while Soren was under the impression that whatever war, like, he had to have known like how much time had passed, but he just didn't want to accept it. So for a while he's like, oh, that was the war that I fought in. That's how long that war raged, was like 50, 60 years was that war, or however long it was. But no, different war. I think so, like, step one for him kind of breaking out of his like, I must become Drow Soren and pick my life back up where it was left off. Step one was, hey Soren, the war is over. The war is over. You don't have to be a dickhead about dudemancy and the Luxon. 2, that family, reuniting that family and just seeing like they're nice to me and they don't even really know me. That's fucked. And they were respectful of his religion. Like, oh my gosh, you're a follower of the Luxon. Here's this ring. We thought it was neat. And I'm like, there's something to be said here about like these random people like having a trinket to a religion as like a souvenir, but we're not going to get into that.
Colonize is gonna colonize. What do you want?
Yeah, that's some white people behavior. And then that almost immediate conversation he has with his cousin at Pins and Needles, where he just sort of tells the truth. I was like, I killed your aunt and uncle. And he's like, what are you talking about? They're
Literally,
fine.
what are you talking about?
And
Mom's birthday's like, next month.
And he's sitting there like, I didn't kill them. And he's like, no. And that's sort of when he starts to accept that like Barham is always going to be a part of him because he wants to have this relationship with the Keenhammers, and he can, whether it's actually Barham in his head or like his significant mental illness in his head that talks to him. Little column A, little column B.
Who's to say?
He starts to build his own identity as Soren Keenhammer of Den Daviana, which I think was like a very like a bigger moment than I ever anticipated it being. It was just like, hey guys, he's not going to try and become a drow anymore. We can focus on other things. But everyone's like, oh my god, like it was a lot bigger and deeper and more emotional than I imagined when I was just like RPing that moment of like, he washes out all the hair dye and like stops and starts eating food again.
I don't think you ever mentioned it in game that Soren wanted to become a drow. I think you like hinted at it a little bit, but you never actually said it.
I think he was too scared to say that he wanted it in case he couldn't have it. But he would heavily imply it being like, I used to be super tall and like, especially around Dermot, he'd be like, I was super tall and hot when I was a drow. Like, please like me. And then I think the final nail in the coffin of I can never become a drow again was when Dermot said that he liked that they were the same height, and Soren's like, I can never grow.
Platform shoes? I don't know her.
Yeah, it's just like, fuck being a drow, fuck it, I don't care anymore. Dermot like settled short.
Mm-hmm.
Which is really hilarious. Cute.
So one of the other times you see Dermot is in the tournament with Arte. Arte was a powerhouse throughout that entire tournament, but Dermot just keeping Arte at range and being like, no, you're blind now.
That was so insane. Yeah. And I just remember, like, I was under so much stress for that fight because I was like, Soren's not going to know what to do with himself. And, like, I think that's when his feelings towards Dermot became really real for him, was, like, watching him fight his friend. And he, like, obviously cares deeply about Arte. That is his friend. But in that moment, he's like, I'm going to have, like, this sucks. Like, no one gets to win in Soren's mind. Like, no one wins because either he sees Arte get the shit kicked out of her, or somehow worse, Dermot getting the shit kicked out of him. And didn't he cheat? He cheated for Arte? He helped.
I think you did both.
He gave Dermot a fragment of possibility, which thank God Dermot didn't use it because that beacon was corrupted. And I hope he didn't use. Did he use it?
Possibly.
Stop. Okay, hopefully he didn't get the red hands like he did. But he also, I think he did like a celestial healing on Arte at one point, which is like.
And I'm looking back at the battle map I have for it, and Dermot was at 12 HP, ending that.
Sweet baby, perfect angel boy, love of Soren's life.
I think towards the end of that, Arte was like not able to hit, and when she did hit, it was like, I'm just doing like a piddly amounts of damage. Because like the first time that she hits him with like all of her stuff, he's done, but just couldn't get it.
I loved that tournament arc because everyone kind of like, it was like me and Eve were like getting snacks and Kai was doing whatever the fuck Kai does, which is just like be suspicious of everyone around us. And I just remember having so much fun coming up with the different chants for Arte.
That was great.
Just based off of chants that I would do like in the supporter section at soccer games, and just making them about Arte was so fun. And then it's watching that she's long, she's strong, she'll fuck you right up Arte chant go around Onkarel, and like ages later they'd be like, oh my god, that's Arte, she's long, she's strong, she'll fuck you right up. Like, that was so cool.
You have to imagine, like, 20 years later, like, Arte's just walking around Onkarel, and there's a little kid that's like, she's long, she's strong, she'll fuck you right up.
Arte. That was fun. That was a fun thing until it wasn't. And then Eve's like, Soren's, what's wrong? And he's like, I just imagine that whole fight just had that fucking song from, oh my god, Yu-Gi-Oh! The movie.
Oh god.
Or no, there was maybe it's Pokemon the movie where it's like, brother, my brother, what are we fighting for? I don't remember which movie that's from, but it's some like kid movie from the 90s. That was what was in my head that whole fight. It was a terrible time for Soren. Haley had a lot of fun.
One of the other things that happened during this final arc, as you've committed to being like, all right, I'm ready to throw this life behind me, ready to move on and do something different. And part of that, ironically, became turning further into the Luxon by becoming the Redeemer.
Oh my god, that was wild.
Giving up your ability to talk to your boyfriend.
So for the listeners, Soren was a warlock, and the whole time Soren thought his patron was the Luxon. I had my reservations, but Soren was like unquestioningly, unerringly, this is the Luxon. Told all of his secrets to the Luxon, like basically used his like Pact of the Tome book as a diary, and he had a page in it where he could do like unlimited sendings to 3 people, and like of course Dermot's always on that list. He's got to text his boyfriend. And he figures out at some point that like it's not the Luxon. It ended up being Alexian. But he chooses to let the Luxon help him out of that situation and becomes a Oath of Redemption paladin, which was such a oh my god, like chills. The sword, his old sword from when he was a soldier, coming down and like spearing the book, and just you read about, like, as someone who's been like D&D adjacent for a really long time, like you read about moments in other people's games where they have that moment, and you like watch actual plays have that moment, but like that was like the big like, oh my god, Dungeons and Dragons moment. Like I've had 2 of them now. Hey. One was in Sharky's game when my fucking joke of always casting Death Ward on Atticus ended up helping win the campaign by accident.
When he inevitably popped back up.
Oh my god, that and then Soren becoming paladin was insane, and just sort of cemented like, nope, he's his own person in charge of his own destiny, and fuck Dendaviana to an extent.
And then as you go, and I think one of the other like beautiful moments that happened was truly like the end, where like Soren, who has carried all this weight, and before getting to the final boss of Alexian, who is his tortured soul, like lashing out at everybody. Spoilers for Call of the Netherdeep, sorry. As he's lashing out at everybody, I think it's Soren who is like the one that recognizes, this is just a hurt person. I know how to deal with hurt people.
Well, Soren saw a lot of him. Yeah, Soren saw a lot of himself in Alexian, just sort of like going through all the stages of grief after going through it. Like, obviously, whatever war Soren was in was not the fucking calamity. Right. But he's no stranger to the horrors of war and like the guilt that comes with like surviving war, just being like that whole sequence where we were going through Alexian's memories were just so like felt like Soren was taking a walk through his own life, sort of.
Complete with a stint in Bazozan.
Complete with a stint in Bazozan. Like the one part that he didn't really understand was like his parents would never have done what Alexian's parents did. He's just like, why are you bitching? Your parents loved you enough to die for you. Like, what's that like? But I just remember when he becomes old man Alexian, there was never a moment in my mind where it was like, we're gonna attack this like sweet old geezer. It was just, this old geezer needs a goddamn hug. That was like going into that battle, because he got this like divine mission to redeem. There was no question in his mind. He's like, I'm gonna make sure this guy feels better about himself or die trying, because like, what's the worst that's gonna happen to me? There's a fucking beacon upstairs.
However it may happen, you know, when a consecuted person dies with a corrupted beacon, but sure. We'll
Soren has an intelligence of 10.
That's literally baseline.
Yeah, he's just like, you know what? It worked before, it's gonna work just fine again. So I deliberately in that fight was trying not to take harmful actions until the one that I did, but I don't remember if I said out loud, I was like, I don't want this to be like lethal damage. Just to kind of knock him out of it. Like, I imagine just like hitting with like blunt edge or like handle, just to be like, snap out of it, my bitch. Like, I need you to listen to me. But he tried not, because if you look up like the tenets of redemption, like violence is one of the last resorts. And Soren, I think it came out when, after the fight with the Aboleth, when it kidnapped Dermot, and he just has this mental breakdown of like, I'm sick of having to fight. He never wanted to fight when he never wanted to be a soldier. He never wanted to fight in war. He never, like, I don't imagine that he really wanted to be an adventurer. He was just so sick of fighting that when like I was looking at the different paladin oaths, and like redemption was the one that I think I was going to pick anyway, but it was like, violence is like your last option. I'm like, that's my boy. So I had on my screen, this screen had Roll20 up, and this screen had his character sheet. It had the tenets of Oath of Redemption, and it had I had a list of things of like, if A then B, if B then C, and like all these different things, like me trying to plan. Game. Yeah, I had I had combat flowcharts. I had non-violent. I had as a last resort violence, and there's no bartering. There's no like, I can't get through to this guy. We just got to put him down. Flowcharts. And I stayed with the non-violent one, and it was really like, I felt bad because everyone was like doing all this damage, and I'm just in there being like, baby, don't, guys.
My favorite part about that is that you got like your personal channel divinity gives you a bonus to like a boost to your persuasion checks. And that ended up being the thing that did it.
Yep, I did that. Yes, I did that channel divinity, Emissary of Peace, and that was the one that I had for the non-violent route. But if I had to go the like, we gotta just put this dude down, he's too far gone, there's Rebuke the Violent. But I was like, I don't want to use that one. So that was, yeah, I think there was something really poetic about the fact that you told us later that we had like the easy route through the Netherdeep, and the other party got like the shit kicked out of them really badly. Yep. And I think if we had gone through getting the shit kicked out of us badly, the fight may have gone differently, but because we got to see his motivations, his past, sort of like what made him tick, that's how we were able to end the violence with a hug. Be the Kendall Jenner handing the Pepsi to the cop.
Yeah.
Because I feel like if the Emerald Pact, especially with Haley and Sorn having some kind of feelings about Ao, I don't know if that fight would have gone the same way if the Pact had done it and gone through the meat grinder part of the Netherdeep.
Mm.
I still, to this day, stand by the fact that I didn't trust Ao the second she's like, I'm super thrilled that I have this spear of a betrayer god, and Sorn's like, you do not pass the vibe check, my bitch. I know you're Dermot's best and oldest friend, and therefore I will give you a hall pass, but know that I'm watching you. And then of like, you should keep an eye on Ao, and then Dermot being like, you know Ao's a good person, and Sorn's like, of course, I'm so sorry. That haunts him to this day. He thinks about where he's like, I'm gonna be brave and be like, maybe you should keep an eye on your friend that has this cursed artifact. She's a good person. Oh my god, you're right.
She's one of the good ones.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also like rich coming from your party who has Eve with one of those artifacts.
Yeah, but Eve literally like
Eve for sure.
Yeah, I feel like Eve with the mace, which Lindsay can speak to Eve with the mace, but from the outside, it seemed like Eve was never like picking up with the mace put down, versus Ao was like, give me all the things you're putting down. And Sorn was not a big fan. I mean, he hated that Eve had the mace too, but he knew there was no reasoning with Eve.
Well, Eve also, like, through sheer willpower, turned a devil into, like, being like, maybe things are okay.
Yeah, because that's fucking Eve.
Expertise in persuasion. And
I mean, Sorn said that Eve was the best of us, like, multiple times, because he's like, all of us here suck, except for Eve, and, like, Eve's the best of us.
Yeah, and then eventually we end the game as Sorn ends it with the hug, the Kendall Jenner handing the Pepsi, and we go into our epilogues with Sorn growing old several times with Dermot. But
they're gonna be together until being consecuted makes them crazy.
And they'll still be
that
together.
Happens eventually. They'll sit there and they'll be like, what are you talking about, old man Sorn? She's long and strong and she'll fuck you up, I'll say. They'll be like, sure, Grandpa.
Get you back to bed.
I know we had talked about this, but I just want it on record.
Sure.
As we were sort of going real into the weeds on like Lux and Faith and stuff, and this is a direct appeal to Matthew Mercer. Hey Matt, did you make fucking fantasy Scientology? Because it feels like you made fantasy Scientology. Because you create this like artifact that's like a totem that helps people like their soul come back into a new body, and that's a thing that happens in Scientology, apparently. So I would love, like, I feel like if I ever get the opportunity to meet Matt Mercer, I'm only gonna have one question. That's gonna be, did you mean to invent fantasy Scientology when you did the Lux and Faith? And does that mean that I've accidentally created my favorite D&D character that's in like a weird fucked up cult?
I'll let you know, like this is producer Sharky talking right now. I can make that a short and like tag him in it on Twitter. Like I can.
Oh my god, please!
I can tag him on Twitter with just that clip there if you want me to.
Oh my god, do it.
Editor's note.
tag me in it too, so I see it.
Fantastic.
But yeah, it's like, oh, you have one cult or the other cult.
I saw this frame of thought came up because I saw a TikTok about this girl who's like deconstructing from Scientology, and she's like, oh, when my dad, like as my dad was dying, we were talking about how like what item is he supposed to like remember in his next life so that we know it's him. And I'm watching this video and I'm like, oh my god, this sounds like the faith of the Luxon. And I think I messaged you like immediately, Decker. I sent you the TikTok.
You did.
It was like, is Soren a Scientologist?
I remember him talking about like the esotericisms of like, you know, the spirit versus the body and like moving on to another body and stuff like that. But you know, sometimes someone's already done it. Unfortunately.
Yeah, that's one thing that's always like, I would love Matt's input on like what happens to the personality that was developing before the soul sort of starts remembering, because like having like Soren struggles with the fact that like he stole Baram's life. To Soren, he feels like he stole Baram's life. Like Baram had friends, he was like, he had a job, he had a life, family, friends, people he may or may not have been in relationships with. I think Baram's canonically kind of a slut, which we love for him. Good for him. And then Soren wakes up and Baram's just gone. And whether the Baram in Soren's head is just like a manifestation of Soren's guilt or like actually Baram in there, I would love Matt's take on it, because I tried to have it be a question of whether like, is Baram really in Soren's head, or is it just Soren needing an outlet for the guilt of like, I may not have killed my parents, but I definitely killed their son.
Well, and you have to remember, they didn't, most people when they enter anamnesis is usually around their teens or so. Soren didn't have, or Baram didn't have that, because Soren was still trapped with Alexian until it was time for him to pop out. And then Alexian's like, okay, you're up now, go.
Oh, that's why when you try diving deep enough into his memories, it was just red, because he was like in a basket with Alexian.
Mm-hmm.
He just kept his soul in a basket.
He was in the Alexian basket.
He's just like, so Soren's soul went into unborn baby Keenhammer at moment of birth, according to the scriptures of the Luxon, and me being a Catholic, and well, former Catholic, and but Alexian said, no, you stay asleep, little idiot, until everyone else in your party is ready for you.
And then you know, everyone, because dwarves are the longest lived out of everyone there, except maybe Arte, an entity who lasts the longest.
You know how you said in the game that like Alexian made two groups of people, one to redeem him and one to end him? Mm-hmm. It just clicked that we were set up for the redemption the whole time.
Yep.
Because of how we were doing things. And then I was like, I think that they would have killed him because they went through the meat grinder, and that was by design. I'm just getting it now on camera.
Like I'm some kind of storyteller or something.
It's like you're some kind of storyteller or something.
Yeah, so those are, and like, I can't take full credit for that. I'm just making it make sense on the paper. Like, the paper tells me this is what happens when you go here, 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 and here. But I just make sense of it, and that's how I made sense of it. Of like, okay, there's two divergent pathways. At this point, you can go this way, or you can go to this hidden door that just opened up. You guys took the hidden door because of course you did.
It's a hidden door. It screams, go this way. That way probably is boring and stupid.
It wasn't. It was much more deadly.
Yeah, we picked the right door. I think the only thing that I feel is like a loose end for Soren, sure. I would have loved more time role-playing with his family when he found them, like when he goes to them in jail. I would have loved like a longer, more nuanced conversation with his mother of just like, so like, how did you think this was gonna work out? Like, now that I'm here, big
plan there.
Like, I would have loved just for like, for Soren, not like, I don't think Soren needs it. I just wanted it. Of like Soren sitting cross-legged in like a really nice chair.
The Captain America pose. So
So, you tried to have me killed. Surprise, bitch. You really
thought you'd seen the last of me.
Yeah, surprise, bitch. You thought you'd seen the last of me. Rolls in. I mean, I know you said that, like, one of his, like, the guard was like, hey, Mother Daviana, your son Soren is still alive, and she just, like, screams in rage that he's still alive. Which, like, what a horrible thing for a mother to be upset that her child is still alive. That's horrible. I would have just loved the opportunity for him to have, like, a conversation of, like, how did you think this was gonna end up? Like, you're working for Lolth. Like, isn't she, like, the queen of actual lying? Like, where the fuck are you going with this, Mom? Like, I have this great life now, and let me tell you all about it. Like, it would have been fun for me, but
I don't think you get anything out of her that you didn't already find out through, outside sources. I think literally as you're going around and redeeming people as an Oath of Redemption Paladin, you also have to cut those ties of those people who are not gonna... And it's funny that we're doing this the day after Thanksgiving, because it's a toxic family thing of, like, you gotta cut those people out.
I do love that you said he never gets through to his mother. He never advocates for her execution, because he has too much fun, like, going to her cell and, like, reading from the Luxon Bible to her because it's funny. But he gets through to his sister. Yeah. And they sort of, like, heal together because, like, she's as much of a victim as Soren. They're just opposite sides of the same coin, where, like...
It's hard to see being a victim when you're, like, given all the first place trophies.
Yeah, but she still, like, had to sell out her brother. She's still, like... At least in Soren's eyes, she's a victim because she got inducted into a cult without really having a choice. Like, the roles could have easily been reversed, where it could have been... He was the golden child and she was the one cast out, and he's just like, she's been through shit just as I have. Like, she's in this jail cell because mom and dad and whoever else put her there. Whether she, like, made choices on her own, I don't know, but he didn't give up on his sister even though she was a total bitch. I love that.
You'll always have that sibling rivalry. It won't be as pointed as it used to be.
Yeah, it won't be like, I fantasize about killing you in my dreams.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is a real thing. I also love that when we were fighting the Aboleth, when it kidnapped Dermot, which, chef's kiss, beautiful, because he's like, when he's asking for the map, when we were stuck in the desert and the only role I had was religion that I was proficient in, because he has not very helpful proficiencies when, like, trying to find one's way through a desert, and trading the information of, like, why do you want to help Ao so badly? And he thinks about Dermot, and then now the Aboleth / Alexian knew that Dermot was very important to him, and as, like, a last-ditch effort to whatever the Aboleth wanted to do, takes Dermot, and Soren goes fucking sicko mode. When he made that, I don't know if it was a wisdom save or what save it was, and turned into the sister of, like, Soren the Thorn, and, like, seeing his perfect sister and him just being like, fuck you.
Yeah.
Because if it had turned into himself or his mom, it would not have been good.
Yep. It was a choice.
It would have been neat, like, in retrospect. I don't know if I think at that point Dermot had told him, like, I like that you're small like me, like, we can meet each other on equal ground or whatever, which Soren took literally, which I don't know if Dermot meant it literally, but Soren took it literally. I think it would have been a powerful moment of, like, letting go of the drow so that he could be the dwarf. If that had happened, that would have been a cool moment. But it was still fun getting him to be like, try again, bitch! I already killed my sister in my dreams the other day.
Yeah. But yeah, that was, like, it was really cool to play a character, or to help play a character. I play a character very similarly. and he becomes an NPC on a lot of my other games where it's not quite Consecution because we're not playing in Exandria, but it's similar in that he is reincarnated over and over and over to fight this great evil. Him and his best friend and some of the other people and the descendants of this party that fought this great evil, centuries ago, comes back over and over and over and over and over again to keep doing this. And this time, this is the one that's finally going to do it. Fingers crossed. But he has full faculties when he comes back. But he just keeps coming back and keeps trying to fight this evil. And I don't think it's really come into his mind of like what happens after, because he hasn't gotten there yet.
Mm-hmm.
So I took some inspiration from that character as well, and some of the things that I think if I was DMing that character, if I was DMing my own character, those are some of the story beats I would take with him. Of like, well, what happens after? I think he just dies. I think he just goes somewhere and dies because he's like, all right, I'm all done.
Like a sick cat or something. He just goes in the closet and dies.
Yeah, he just goes in the closet and he's like, my work here is done. Stops breathing.
Meanwhile, like Sorn, for me, it was like his life got to actually like begin when the adventure was over, versus like he was able to like forge a new life for himself and with Dermot. And I still, point of pride, I know Tasha wanted it so bad, but Sorn and Dermot never even kissed in the game.
Got real close,
but Sorn probably has never done that with anyone before because he was just a good Catholic boy.
Yep.
Good Catholic boy, and then was like a good Catholic soldier. Didn't have time for such things.
Now he does. Now he's got nothing but time.
I would also have loved the conversation with his mom and being like, and this is my boyfriend, a fucking farm boy from a city that didn't even exist the last time I was alive. And he's gonna be heading Dave Yana with me. Suck my dick forever, Mom.
What a great way to end this. Suck my dick forever, Mom.
That's Sword. Suck my dick forever, Mom.
But I love all these themes of like cutting the toxic people out of your life or tormenting them. Whichever you want to do. And those themes I think resonated not just with clearly resonated with you, but also deeply resonated with me on a personal level. So I am appreciative that we got to work through that together.
Same. It was very healing being Sorn, and I literally cannot listen to Sleep Token without thinking of my good boy. That's his album.
But I think we got there with the point that I originally envisioned when I was like, "Haley, let's talk about Sorn."
Yep.
We talked about Consecution and what what our version of that looked like, because like I said, we never had a PC out there. Like I custom made a lineage specifically for Sorn before Tasha's came out with their custom lineages. I made one specifically for the drow features taking over, and I took a lot of inspiration from like character bleed with that, because a lot of those things just kind of unlock when like I play a rogue, and sometimes I feel like I can just be just a little more stealthy when I walk around when I play my rogue, or I get a little better at talking because he's such a fast talker and stuff like that. So I took inspiration from that, and that's why you ended up suddenly having dark vision or longer dark vision to like represent that, and then you had a weapon proficiency to like represent that as well, and stuff like that. Just like picking up those old skills that you already had, just kind of unlocking them back in the synapses firing again.
Oh yeah, like I imagine if he had classes in his last life, he would have been a fighter. And before he sort of like got his shit back together, he was a warlock. Like he wouldn't have had fucking magic outside of racial magic when he was a fighter. And then he remembers that he was a fighter, and he immediately is just like, I see your Eldritch Blast, but I raise you a fucking Divine Smite.
Yeah. And so I thought some of that was really cool. taking that inspiration from character bleed and stuff like that. But I think that's a good point. Dropping off point from here. It was really fun. I enjoyed it.
Oh yeah, that was probably playing in that game, like that campaign was like, I feel the most fun I've ever had playing Dungeons and Dragons. And I know I've said this to you offline, but like, I will play in any game, whatever you run, whether it's D&D or Vampire or any of these other games that I don't know what the names of, but you just be like, I'm running a game, and I'll be like, bitch, I'm there. Sign me the fuck up.
But yeah, we'll end there with that glowing review. I appreciate that. This has been Without Context Podcast. Matt, if you're watching this, I don't know.
Why did you make Fantasy Scientology?
Thanks for Exandria. I think that's what I have to say here.
Why did you make Fantasy Scientology? Why?
We'll have all of our links. We'll have all of our links as always on the bottom. You can click them to find out more about all of our neat going-ons, if any. We have all of our other things. Check out our Spotify or wherever you may be listening to this. We are appreciative of that. And I think there's something that plays at the end of this, so I don't have to go too far in depth about that after that. So without any further ado, this is Anxiety Lasagna. I'm Deca. See you later.
Why'd you make Fantasy Scientology, Matt? Why? It's the worst.